Hello and welcome to a new podcast from the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden. This is Hussein Askary. It's November the 16th. As you may have noticed on our website recently, we reviewed two important papers or documents issued by Chinese authorities. One was called The Epic Journey of China from Poverty to Prosperity. And recently, the latest one was on we made a thorough review of the final resolution, which was adopted by the sixth session of the Communist Party of China's Central Committee, which is the final plenary session before the conclusion of the 19th Congress. Now, it's very important, as we say in the conclusion of our reviews, that it's very important to understand the mind of the Chinese leadership, because if you want to know where this ship is going, you need to know how the captain is thinking. So to discuss these matters, we have with us from Shanghai, Professor Michele Geraci. He's a former Undersecretary of State for the Economics Ministry of Italy. Now you are also teaching economics in China. Welcome, Professor Geraci.
Thank you very much for your invitation. Very kind. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much for taking the time, your precious time, to be with us. But we think it's very important for our viewers and people here to get an inside idea of how the mechanisms, how the thinking is going on in China. But the first question is, you have also seen the review we have done, but here people say, well, China, the only thing you need to know about China, it's an authoritarian regime, it's Communist Party leadership. You don't really need to know more than that. But is it important to understand how the leadership of the Communist Party of China, President Xi Jinping, and the top leadership, how they think about China, about economics, about the progress of China from our standpoint?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you and your team for the excellent review that really answers the question in a way that I could not agree more. I'm surprised that people think that they would not need to know the way the Chinese leadership think, and they are just satisfied with the thinking China is a communist authoritarian regime and the usual definitions that may be correct, but they don't have the depth that is required. You know, knowing how leaders think is like really the basic of understanding what other countries do. We do this in corporate finance. I used to work in investment banking before doing macroeconomy. And, you know, when you buy shares in a company, yes, you analyze the financial statements, the strategy, the market position of the company. But ultimately, when you buy shares, you're giving money to the CEO, the CFO of the firm for them to do what they think is good. And how would you give money to someone if you don't know what they're going to do with it? So similarly, countries, companies that want to invest in China, they want to do business with China, they even want to know what China is going to do, maybe because they fear competition, they may fear that China would enter our own Western markets. So whether you're an active player in the Chinese market or a passive, necessary player, because China will enter our market, you must really understand how they think. I cannot make this any more clear. You must understand how the ship is driven, the ship with 1.4 billion people. I think I'm using your word to say. The captain needs to steer it in the direction that he sees fits. So we need to understand both the way people think and therefore why they act. And this is the best way to predict future action. So this is my recommendation to all your viewers. Do try to understand how the leadership think.
Yes, thank you for your appreciation. This is important for us. There are several things which we actually would like to take up, but one of the fascinating things is that you notice in how the leadership is designing the policy, how it is followed through, and how it has actually accomplished the goals they had set up for themselves. Now we know that there was the first centennial goal by 2020. China was supposed reach the goal of being a moderately prosperous country by eliminating poverty or extreme poverty in the country, which they said they will reach by 2020, and it was accomplished. Now they say by 2035 we will be a moderate socialist country, an advanced socialist country in all respects. Now these things may mean general things, but we have summarized that by 2035, China is intending to become the world leader in most industrial, technological, and other aspects of economics. And what we say there is that unless something terrible happens, like a world war or an asteroid hits Earth and demolishes old civilization, we believe that China will reach that goal. And then we have the other centennial goal by 2049. China will become a socialist, prosperous, democratic country, harmonious and beautiful. Now, these are like stepping stones for the leadership set for itself to reach by that time. Now, looking at what they said before, that they will do by 2020, we assume that they will reach the goals they are setting for themselves by 2035, 2049. Is that a reasonable prediction to make?
It is. Again, I use the comparison of banking. China never misses its earning forecast. And this is not really to be pro-China or to be singing the praise of the Communist Party of China. People in Europe need to understand that what we like or what the audience like, the preference, the taste, is completely irrelevant. We are not talking about what I would like. We are analysts and we are trying to forecast what could happen. And I do have a strong belief that China does and will deliver their goals. The track record of China in terms of economic target and reaching it is pretty much outstanding. Maybe not 100%, but very, very high for all international standards. Much more, of course, than other European markets that work on different social and economic systems. So, of course, China will meet those targets. Those targets maybe appear to be unreasonable for some of the Western audience, because we are not used to having 800 million taken out of poverty in 40 years. We are not used to have 9.5% GDP growth every year on average for 40 years. We have not been used to see personal income growing by 120 times for both rural and urban residents. So we do doubt, and the doubt is a good thing. Doubt is the first step to get into a deeper knowledge. But we must not make the doubt become a reality. So we doubt, we question, we do the analysis, and from my 10, 13 years in China, I have a strong belief that they will reach those targets. The China manufacturing that you implicitly refer to does aim at building China excellency in 10 manufacturing sectors that range from semiconductors, microchip, robotics, marine, spacecraft, aircraft, and so on. And so basically, China is doing it, and even Harvard University, so the bastion of American academic, does predict that China will surpass the United States in the quality and production of semiconductor very soon, in the next couple of years. So China may not need so much, even the 573 nanometers technology that currently is in the almost the monopoly by Korean, Taiwan, and the United States. And so this semiconductor is something that I would monitor very carefully to check if our, let's say, positive prediction about China reaching its goal will be achieved or not, because that's a very good test of Chinese capability to really upgrade. And if they do in the semiconductor, which is the highest bar, the most difficult one, then even more so they will do in the other sectors. And you mentioned a moderately well-off society, Xiaokan. They have pretty much reached it. They have some challenges, the so-called middle income trap, $10,000 US per capita, the level where the country needs to decide or they needs to act to make sure that they don't fall into this trap that is basically pushing on not so cheap manufacturing. And so they compete with the cheaper manufacturer of other Asian countries and not so good quality. So they compete with the higher standard of Korean, Japanese, and Western. So China needs to find the route. And with this China manufacturing, they're indeed finding the route of going onto the quality path. So they will leave the cheap manufacturing to the other emerging markets. So the process of development of Asia will also benefit other countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, Indonesia, that will take on what China used to do 10 and 15 years ago.
Yeah, that's very important, the question, because this brings us to the what the Chinese call the Xi Jinping's thought in the new era. Now, this might sound like a big slogan to glorify the leader and put him at the high level with Mao Zedong and Deng Xiaoping and all this we have heard, and to concentrate the power in the hands of the supreme leader and so on and so forth. But if you look at the economic thinking of Xi Jinping through the years, if you go back even to 2008, 2009, but even when he became the Secretary General, his economic thinking is exactly what you have been saying. He has been emphasizing the shift from the quantity cheap production, because he said we will hit the wall if we continue doing the same thing with the same level of technology. But he says now we have to move to a higher quality growth. And in that sense, both he, but also other party leaders, we reviewed the 14th five-year plan, where they said, well, we don't no longer measure our economy in GDP. What we need to measure our economy is the productivity of our economy, the productivity of our labor, and the level of technological progress we are making. And also, even in that, they measure the fact that innovation is a key element of this future progress, but also that culture plays an important role. The education and cultural level of the people of China and the worker in China plays a key role in this qualitative shift to a higher level of economic progress. So in that sense, I don't know if you have your own understanding of what they call Xi Jinping's thought in the new era, if you can explain that.
I tell you, the move to innovation, to better quality is pervasive in many aspects of the society and the economy of China. I mentioned this China manufacturing, which is maybe the most visible one, and probably the one that is best understood or more easily understandable by Western audience. But the shift on quality is really on everything. It's about hardware, and it's also about the software. It is about developing infrastructure, high-speed rail, which most advanced in the world, with almost 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail. But it's also, and this is what I call the hardware, but it's also the software. There is this symbiosis between software and hardware, between technology that is not an enabler of better efficiency, but it's also an enabler of the change in behavior in the way people live. And we have many examples. We have the mobile payment, the delivery system. You can pretty much in China buy anything at any time and will be delivered in your doorsteps within a couple of hours. And what Xi Jinping would like to have is to really, it's part of this bigger plan to rejuvenate the grandeur of the Chinese nation. That if we look at history, has always been the biggest economy, with also technology advancement for thousands of years, with the exception of the famous 120, 150 years since the mid of 19th century to today. So the goal of Xi Jinping is very clear. We bring back China to where history says China should be. So if you are a Western analyst and you look at the chart of GDP contribution of China over the last 100 years, you say, wow, we are worried, this is China rise. However, if you expand the time horizon and you look at the history for the last 2000 years, you really see a little blip of UK, US, and Europe rising to being major economies. Of course, after the Industrial Revolution and the Second World War until now, and China retrenching until 1980s, and now China is just regaining its old status and position in the world economy. So in my view, this is really the meaning of what Xi Jinping would like to achieve with this concept of development on the new era. A prosperous society, harmonious. There are elements that already here. You know, China, for all, let's say, standard, is a very safe society on the streets, in terms of crime, in terms of physical violence. It's also little by little moving into a more and more rule of law. Xi Jinping is also tackling with some success corruption to make the system more fair. Because at the end of the day, people like a fair chance. He's tackling also income disparity, which does not mean you cannot be rich. It just means that there are some limits to how much wealth can be concentrated. So all these things are part of the Xi Jinping vision to build this society that is not just economically well off or relatively or moderately well off, but also socially stable. And this is really a message to all our friends in governments in Europe. And this may sound very unusual. The Chinese government works to serve the people. They do not need to have power as for the sake of it, as we think in the history of the 19th centuries, countries had colonies, a dictator, military dictatorship, power for the sake of power. In many Latin American countries and so on. No, this is different. This is a dictatorship of the people. That sounds strange, but really it's a government that works. And I can tell you, because I've met many of them, they are capable and they do the good of the people in their own interest, and because they feel the responsibility of the overall rejuvenation of the Chinese nation.
Yeah, there is. We have had a lot of discussion now. There was the Democracy Summit. There is, all kinds of discussions. The Chinese are replying, say, look, you have your democracy system. We have our own democracy system. But I think at the end of the day, what they say is that what is important for governance is that, are you delivering a better living standard for your people? Are they safer? Are they happier? Are they more prosperous? And so on and so forth. So it's what they call result-based system. If you have not delivered what you promised the people, then what is the use of having new leadership the whole time, which does not really deliver to its people what it has been promising? So in that sense, it has a different definition of governance and democracy and so on, which is based on that, are the people satisfied or not with what the government has achieved. So it's very difficult for people here looking from outside to see how do the Chinese people see their leadership, see their government, because we have really no idea. Looking at the Western media, we have no idea how do the Chinese people look at what their government is doing. Are they doing a good job, doing a bad job, and so on and so forth? And how does that whole system works? But the thing what you mentioned is that the President Xi Jinping, or the communist, the idea is not the communist idea we have. I mean, he says in some of his speeches, our idea is not that everybody would be completely equal. This is not our goal. Our goal is that we have a certain level of prosperity for everybody, but we can allow certain people to advance because that will also help bring out the potential from the population, the innovative aspect of the enterprises and so on. But one of the important things you mentioned is that the fighting of corruption, because this paper, the CPC, the final resolution of the 6th session, plenary session, says our biggest enemy is corruption. Corruption inside the party itself, because people tend to forget why they are in the party, what is the mission of the party, and by being, trying to climb in the party without doing any hard work, without delivering results for the people. So I think they did a big job in cleaning up the party, because there was a lot of corruption in the party. They admitted it themselves in this document, but this is also reflects on the external aspect of China's dealings through the Belt and Road, through its investments outside. So this problem of corruption, is it something which is now resolved, or is it something which they tend to continue working on?
No, it's not resolved. They continue to working on. It's improving. People do understand that this is serious. It's been going on for a number of years. There have been some famous cases, some examples, deterrent for other people to try to make similar mistakes. I think Xi Jinping is very smart to recognize that things in the past used to be done in China in a way that was not always 100% in line with the rules. He is smart enough to understand that was acceptable as long as it did serve the benefit of the society. But then a few years back, he drew a line and said, okay, now this is over. Now we have achieved, we have got rid of poverty. It was acceptable to do certain things because we were hungry at the time. Now, no more. So now we need to have a completely different modus operandi. And he's very serious about it. It's not complete. It's on the same, it's in the right direction. And this, let's say, discussion on the corruption is also a part of a overall difference, maybe specific, characteristic of China. That I want to make it clear. China has many problems, loads of problems. China is not perfect, but the Chinese leadership addresses, and almost all the problems get solved. So this is the different way they do it. And you mentioned the democracy, and you pointed out to a very important concept. China democracy is focused on the result, whilst our democracies are focused on the process. So, and this has been the dilemma that China has tried to come with, and even we, little by little, we are focused on the process. So as long as people vote, for us, that's okay. It doesn't matter who they vote. It doesn't matter if the new leaders do deliver or not. While China does not let the people choose directly the ministers, the government, but the people who run the country do deliver what people want. And so this is the key fundamental difference. Now, we can talk for years whether this is democracy or not. Remember, democracy means in Greek demos kratos, so it means power to the people. It does not mean elections. There are some electoral systems that do deliver that, and maybe in Nordic Scandinavian countries, the system can be more efficient than in some other countries, like in my own country, for example, where people don't get to choose the members of parliament in Italy. They only vote for the party. And so this is a obstacle to having full power in the hands of people. So, academics and we can spend a lot of time to discuss if China is a democracy or not, but basically it's a result-oriented system that does deliver what people want.
Yeah, because also, that's the point China is making, is that we have different political systems, we have different cultural backgrounds and so on, but we can have common goals. We have things that unites us as what President Xi Jinping calls a community for a shared future for mankind. Is not based on everybody having the same political, social, and cultural systems, but we can agree on certain things to do to improve the living standards, to achieve peace in the world. Now we have a lot of tension, military tension going on with both Russia and China, which is, it's quite serious in a sense, but I think it would be easier to solve these problems if we don't try to project our system on China, or somebody else is projecting their own system on someone else. We just simply have to accept that China is a unique country. It has a unique history. It has a unique political system, which the people of China are satisfied with because it's delivering the goods they are promised to be delivered. Now, when it comes to looking forward with the Belt and Road Initiative, the document, of course, does not elaborate much on the Belt and Road Initiative. It's much focused on the developments inside China itself, but it continues to say that the Belt and Road Initiative will be an important part of China's both economic policy, but also foreign policy. So for us here, looking at how to deal with China, we need to know where the Chinese are thinking in terms of if the Belt and Road Initiative will continue, if it will grow, if China will do more investments or will limit its investments, given the fact that it's facing a lot of pressure. Many countries are under pressure to abandon the idea of working with China on the Belt and Road, but we see more and more countries are joining the Belt and Road. Like 2 weeks ago, Eritrea and Burkina, another country in Africa, joined the Belt and Road, in spite of the fact that the United States and others continue to warn against joining the Belt and Road because it's a debt trap. It has all kinds of problems. China wants to control you. But how do you see China's focus on the Belt and Road compared to what it intends to do inside China with China's own economic development?
You know, Hussein, the Belt and Road, for me, is a opportunity. It's an option. It's a free option. The countries can take it or not. Countries that joined the Belt and Road, you mentioned Eritrea, but even Italy, you know, of course, I pushed for it. It's an option for our Italian companies. There is no obligation. If a company is afraid to do business with China, they don't do it. If a company is afraid of debt, that they borrow money from China and they cannot repay, then they don't do it. They just stay at home. They lose the opportunity and they don't take the risk. Every investment has risks and opportunity. And the fear, you know, personally, I care about what my country does. And being a developed country with a GDP of 1.7 trillion euros, I see zero, like 0.0 probability of that trap. You know, we're not going to have 20, 30% of GDP in the hands of China. China is not going to lend to Italy $700 billion. China has invested in Italy 20 billion since the beginning of history, $25 billion over the last 5,000 years. So they're not going to do 500 billion in the next few years. So there is no risk of debt trap. Again, this debt trap thing is a problem for countries that maybe reach out into doing, well, I call it a step, which is more difficult than their own legs can do. Again, if they fear this, they can stay in the Belt and Road. They don't need to leave the Belt and Road. They can continue to be part of this initiative, and they wait and see and only choose and pick and can cherry pick only the project that they see fit. There is no obligation. You know, we in Italy, we have signed the Belt and Road 2.5 years ago, and since then there has been zero obligation on the part of China to force any deal. You know, we have presented opportunities to the Italian companies. Some have decided that they are not interested. Then there was, of course, COVID, so everything got delayed. But in no way joining the BRI initiative is any commitment to doing anything. It's just a platform, a sharing of information. It's good that we know about countries that have had problems. It's good to know about debt trap problems. It's good to know also when China forgoes some of the debt. It is also good to know when and why countries fall into this debt trap. Countries don't fall into the debt trap because the lender lends money. It is because in most cases, again, I talk as a former banker, the country does not use the funds well. Just like when people don't pay back the mortgage, it's not the fault of the bank. They have lent money. In some cases, it could be because maybe the bank lends to people who should have not borrowed, but they are not children. Minister of Finances of countries, small as they may be, they're not children. They do understand their own finances, and they must understand if they can borrow and how much and from whom. And they are not forced in doing this. And therefore, even for the country potentially most exposed to Belt and Road risks, they should look at why they themselves found themselves into trouble. Now, so I think the Belt and Road will continue because it cannot stop. It's a ongoing process. It's an initiative. That's the I at the end. That's what it means. It's not a legal contract, so it will go on and will go on with all its up and downs. So China may push investment in some moments. It may take back some of them. The Belt and Road is not just about China investing, by the way. It's about China and the other countries cooperate. It could be an Italian company working with China to build a road in Africa. And so that would not be investment of China into Italy. We would never see that in the FDI statistic flows, but it will still be beneficial for our company. So there are many aspects on this Belt and Road that will happen. There is no, in a way, target plan. It's just an initiative that tries to stimulate countries to work on development of infrastructure. And I think one of the most positive effects is the reaction of the United States and the European Union, that now we also want to have our own infrastructure plan. This is fantastic. There is space for everyone. If we want to build back a better world and we want to do the EU new infrastructure plan, 300 billion, that's great. That we are not in competition. There is a room for everyone. I think it could be a healthy competition in a way if China set the scene to be the first mover in this area. It stimulates our reaction that could be out of jealousy, out of fear, out of thinking, wow, maybe the Belt and Road is a good idea after all, let's do it also. So be it. This is what the world needs, development of infrastructure.
Yeah, that's one of the things we have been looking at countries who work with China on Belt and Road, especially in Africa or in Asia, is that one of the big issues is that that you have an enormous bottleneck in financing infrastructure because those countries are incapable of either financing or building the infrastructure. So if you don't build infrastructure, it's very difficult for you to get out of these lower productivity. And many of the countries who are in debt trap are already in a debt vicious cycle before China invests in infrastructure. The other problem, people look at investments in infrastructure, or if you take a loan to build infrastructure, they see that as a liability. But infrastructure is actually an asset. It's not a liability. And building infrastructure improves the productivity of that economy so it can move its economy, it can grow, and it can pay back its debt. It's not like, for example, borrowing money to pay old debt. Like many countries fall into that trap. You borrow money to finance the deficit in trade or deficit in the budget. But that money is not invested in something productive. What China does is you invest money in productive projects, which will generate more income for that country to be able to manage its finances. But I think President Xi Jinping, when he was in Africa in 2015, he said you have these three major bottlenecks: the lack of capital, lack of infrastructure, and lack of skilled labor. If you solve these three problems, you'll become like China. We saw it ourselves. We resolved that, and in that sense. Now, you mentioned the fact that actually it could be beneficial to work with China on Belt and Road. Now, which brings us, I think, to our final question here, because what we say in this review is that what is important for us is how do we deal with China? Where can we work with this China, which is already determined to reach a certain goal? And as you mentioned, China will be a world leader in many sectors. and they will create their own supply chains and try to secure those supply chains. But if China is going to become world leader in many of these technologies and these sectors, what is left for Europe or the United States? How our companies, and especially the innovative ones in high-tech sector and elsewhere, is there place left for our European companies to work both inside China, but also work with China? If China becomes dominant in all these sectors of economy and technology, is there something left for European and American companies?
It's a good question. Let's remember that the world will stabilize at China being the biggest economy and regaining the role that it has always had. It's 1/5 of the world population. So it could at some point get to a significant proportion of world GDP on aggregate. Now, how do you compete? The strategy is not easy because China will have scale, and scale will give them a cost advantage. It has scale because it has a big captive market in its own country and semi-captive in Asian countries that are, very populous, hundreds of millions of people in many countries. So that's a great advantage that China has. So what can the West do? A strategy that you can envisage is for, we have to decide, do we want, for example, European champions, or do we want to stay with the small, medium enterprises, the elite, the quality, the artisan, and so on? So this is an industrial strategy that European, I said Europe, it doesn't matter if it's European Union or not, Europe as a continent, including Russia, including the UK, we need to understand how we want to deal with it. For example, small, medium enterprise, they can be following Chinese larger company in a grandfathering scheme, let's say. I'm thinking of Italian auto manufacturer companies. We don't sell too many cars in China, but we do sell a lot of auto component to German car manufacturers that then sell cars to China. So in the northeast of Italy, we have small, medium enterprises whose clients are German company, but whose final product still ends up in China. So this is a way to participate in this growth. So it's a strategy of positioning not in competition, but as a supplier. Classic example, during the gold rush, you would make tools to dig the gold. You don't need to necessarily compete to catch it. But this is easier said than done, and there's probably not space for everyone to do that. That's why I look with interest at the way that we can also do the complementary strategy. So develop a sizable manufacturing company that can compete with the Chinese one. Now, there is a lot of space, I think, for the next decades in Southeast Asia, in Central Asia, in Africa, and in Latin America. You're saying when we talk about the West, we do need to remember let's say Europe, let's make it round, 500 million people, no? Soon 5% of the world population. So pretty much irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. So there are like another 9.5 billion people, let's say 9 billion, let's take out the US and other countries, 9 billion people there will be, not now, of course, that need to develop, that is a potential new market. And just like Italy did with the United States after the war, because the United States helped us to develop, our export to the US grew a lot, so we expanded into this new growing market during the economic development of America. Now we can do the same, and I don't think it's a competition. US, China, Europe, the three main economic blocs in the world together, joining forces to help our companies from these three markets to grow in Asia, in Africa, and Latin America. We have the world divided into developed market. I put China even to that, even if it's not. And we have another, 85% of the world population that is developing and potentially a good market. So those who see China as a competitor and then close the other eye will be the losers. Those who see China as both a competitor and an opportunity they will be the relative winner. And this is my advice, and goes back to the original point. Do know the leaders, do know what China does, and do know the opportunities in the rest of the world, because we can really be pulled by the growth of China. That doesn't have to be a economic competitor only. It could be a opportunity.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate the advice you are giving to us and others, because we see a lot of what the discussion is generally a negative concerning China, but I think there are a lot of positive things we can see and explore. And we really appreciate your insights and the advice you are giving to us generally, but also to our viewers. I thank you very much, Professor Geraci, for taking the time to discuss this matter with us. And we really look forward to having you in future podcasts or webinars. I appreciate you took the time with us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you for our viewers. Please follow our YouTube channel and our website. We will put all the description, and also we will have the link to Professor Geraci's channel on YouTube. He has done a lot of work. He also traveled around China to explore the shifts in the social and economic situation in the country. Thank you very much for being with us today.